Hey everybody, it's Pure Political Pandemonium here, coming at you with a 2024 presidential election prediction. Looking at the current climate, we're just going to say Democrat is going to be the current president, Joe Biden. Republican most likely is going to be Donald Trump. Like it or not, Donald Trump's doing really well compared to anyone else in terms of early polling. Only one that comes close is Ron DeSantis, and even now, Trump's miles ahead of him in terms of straw polls and what's happening with CPAC and everything. They just took a poll at CPAC the other day, and Donald Trump is up by about 45 points over Ron DeSantis. So looking at the way it's going to be, we're going to have a rematch, Donald Trump versus Joe Biden. And let's just check out what Joe Biden's been up to recently. In terms of job approval, it's been going down for a while. Last time he was really positive was back in August of last year, and it's just been tumbling down and down and down. Only in the last couple weeks has he actually gone back up a little bit, and that's solely because he has COVID and hasn't been outside enough to kind of self-sabotage himself. I think their best bet coming into 2024, and they did the same thing back in 2020 when they kept him in the basement, is the best thing that they can do is just keep him hidden. The less that he is out, the less he is opening his mouth and saying things, falling off of his bike, as we've seen, the better it is for the Democratic Party. But I don't think even now that can really prevent what's going to be coming. We can certainly see shifts in the other direction, in any direction that is. We're 2 years out. There's a lot of uncertainty that's going on. But, looking at what we have right now, it's August 7th. We're gonna make a projection based off of what we're seeing now and what I can foresee happening, based off of trends, based off of what will happen with the 2022 midterms, which I think I'll make another video about as well. Make several videos about the 2022 midterms. There's a lot to talk about. So we have a lot going on there. We even have on 538, like them or not, we got a lot of polls here as well of Donald Trump. We're going to focus mainly on the ones of Donald Trump against Joe Biden. We all know if Biden ends up becoming too old and gives it up to Harris or whoever they end up nominating, Kamala Harris is a lot less approved of than Joe Biden is, and Joe Biden's down the tubes. If you look here down in this corner here, Joe Biden and Donald Trump are actually two of the more approved of here in this list. Mitch McConnell's in the dumpster, and Pelosi, Harris, they're just completely underwater. Here it shows that Harris is 2 points lower than Joe Biden, but if you look at these polls here, so it's got a BC rating, but even here, it's actually an equivalent one here, but if you look, for example, down at Emerson, Donald Trump beats Biden by 3, beats Sanders by 5. Here, Donald Trump beats Harris by 7, while he beats Biden by 4, and that's with Harris poll there. YouGov got it a bit. Once again, it's very very close. It's still very early out, but it has Biden up by 2, which even that is different because he won 2020 by about 4.5 points. Donald Trump won 2016. Remember this, by losing the popular vote by 2.5 points. And he can win the election by losing the popular vote by that much. Think about what will happen if we do see a Trump plus 1. It is actually a lot different than what you think. Trump plus 4, Trump plus 6. That's a completely different ballgame there, and that'll be, in terms of the electoral college, it'd be an absolute landslide. So we're going to hop in here. We're going to begin first by discussing what's going to be the safe states, and I'll fill them out really quickly because there's no debate that so 4 out of 5 here with Nebraska. We'll talk about the 2nd district, and we'll talk about a couple states before labeling them safe, but we're going to go to the Democrats, well, up the West Coast, and Illinois, and we can go down the list here. So there's a couple things that I didn't fill out. Oh, I got to fill out Alaska as well. First things first, Delaware, if anybody but Joe Biden runs, would be closer. Would it be close enough to get within a likely margin, which, just to clarify, a likely margin, at least by my standards, is anything that's between 5 and 10%, 5 and 10% margin between candidates there. Let's look at the 2016 election, for example. Delaware, Hillary Clinton only won by 11.4. it's not as massive there. And in New Jersey, which we'll also talk about, Clinton won by 14. Uh, New Jersey Biden won by 16. Delaware Biden won by 19. That's a massive shift there. And of course, Joe Biden was a senator from Delaware for 180 years.
From the time I got to the Senate 180 years ago.
He even thinks that he's the first senator from Delaware. So, he's obviously been a staple in Delaware for a long time. So, obviously, he's more approved of than, say, someone like Hillary Clinton or Kamala Harris would be. And, of course, with this scenario, we do have Joe Biden going against Donald Trump. So, in which case, it would be easily safe. And I think even if Kamala Harris ran, it would be safe. But I think it would, in terms of margins, there'd be a pretty decent difference there. Say, Biden wins it by 16 to 18 points compared to Kamala Harris winning it by about 14, 13 points, that kind of difference, and same thing with New Jersey. New Jersey just had an election for governor last year, and the Republican candidate came within 4.5 points of winning. And some people, get their hopes a little bit too high there and think that that'll reflect on a national scale. And it's just not going to happen. It's just a completely different game in terms of statewide elections versus the national elections. We saw Hillary won it by 14, Biden got it by 16. I think it could get down to 13, 14 points, but that's not, like I said, that's not competitive. It's still going to be solid blue. There's also two states that I want to also say is solid red, and that is our good states of Ohio and Iowa are going to graduate from likely to solid red for 2024. So if we look at the, and I'll tell you why. So Iowa in 2016 went to Trump by about 9.5. Ohio went there by 8.1. And in 2020, Iowa only slimmed down by about a point or so, 8.1. Ohio stayed essentially the same, 8 points on the dot there. So what we're seeing here is we had a national shift by about 2-3 points. And even with the national shift going to the left by about 3 points, Ohio did not move. And Iowa only moved by about a point compared to a 3-point shift. So what we're seeing is these states are continuing to trend red, even during periods where the Democrats are winning the White House here. They're continuing to trend red. And these used to be more battleground states. They said for the longest time that, up until 2020, actually, for the longest time, anyone that won Ohio, North Carolina, and Florida, all three, were pretty much guaranteed to win the election. And of course, we didn't see that happening because there's a lot more shifts that are happening down in the Sun Belt as well as up here in the Rust Belt. But Ohio is a state that I think will be solid Republican for a long time, and Iowa's shaping up to be the exact same. They're pretty similar in that way. So I think that both of them will be solid. We're also going to take a look at Maine. So the 2nd District, it went by a likely margin by about 7.5 points or so in 2020, and it went by a little bit over 10 in 2016. And I think we're going to see it go by 10, 11 points again. And just to put it out there, I think Iowa will be Trump plus 12. I think Ohio will be Trump plus 10.5. So I think Maine's 2nd District will also become solid again, just like it was in 2016. And even, big shifts are certainly possible. This is Maine's 2nd District. Obama won by 8.6. Trump had a shift to 10.3. That's almost a 20-point shift there. So it can move around quite a bit. A lot of things can change. But I think it's going to be solid, and I think that the Democrats will get the 1st District solid. And we'll discuss Maine at large soon enough, but that's just how it is if you break it down. So first things first, we're going to look at what I'll consider the likely states, which is once again between a margin of 5 to 10 percentage points. So we're going to start with the Democrats first, and first things first, we'll do Colorado. So Colorado is a state, as is Virginia, which I will also clarify is going to be likely. Colorado and Virginia are both states that have shifted very far to the left since both going for George Bush in both of his elections, 2000 and 2004. Virginia used to be a Republican stronghold state, but it just has not been the case since 2008. And even in 2016, it went from 5 points to 10 in 2020. And Colorado went from about 5 points to 13.5. So we're seeing massive shifts there. And do I think Colorado will, do I think it'll continue to be a Democrat state? Absolutely. And I think even with Glenn Youngkin winning in Virginia, and he's doing a great job there. I think he's doing a great job for education. I think he's doing a great job for just the state as a whole. And I think that'll certainly have an impact on things. Virginia's been trending to the left for a while now, and I think this will take it back. I think it will cut it back a bit. I think Virginia will probably go by about 6 or 7 points compared to 10. I think Colorado will probably go by about 8 or 9 compared to 13. So like we're seeing probably around like a 4 point shift compared to 2020. So I think, and in terms of shifting as well, 4 point shift. Like I said, 2020, Joe Biden won by about 4.5. I think the popular vote as it stands is a complete toss up. I think it could probably be within. I think Trump could win by 1. I think Biden could win by 1. Either way, it doesn't have an influence on the actual result because we have an electoral college. But I think Colorado will be going by a likely margin, as will Virginia. So I think at the moment that's it for likely states for the Democrats. But I'll hop on to the likely states for the Republicans. And first things first, we got Texas. Texas is a state that's been going to the left as well for a while. And it's certainly not the state that it used to be when Mitt Romney won it by about 15 points. Donald Trump got it by 9 in 2016, but got it by 5.5 in 2020. And the left is very quick to say, we're going to take over Texas. We're gonna flip it. And is that possible? Maybe 12 years from now, 10, 12 years from now, might be. But as it stands, we're seeing a lot of shifts to the right. And we even saw these shifts to the right in 2020 when it was a national shift left. We're seeing shifts to the right all down here in the southern part of Texas and a lot of the counties that are along the border, because the people that live around the border, they don't, they're not a fan of the illegal immigration. They're not a fan of the open borders policy that we're seeing with Joe Biden. The border is an absolute wreck, and I think that'll have a massive influence on the states that are around the border here. So Texas is seeing a lot of shifts to the right along the border, but they are also seeing shifts to the left in the cities, like Dallas, for example, and so we're seeing some conflicting shifts that are going on. But I think that Texas will actually shift further to the right than it was before. Went to Trump by 5.5. I think it'll probably match what we saw in 2016, and that is I think Trump will win it by about 9 points again. He won it by 9 in 2016. I think we'll see it again. The polls had Trump winning in 2020 by about 3 points, and he outperformed the polls by about 3 points. So, we're going to keep seeing a red Texas for a little bit longer, that's for sure. The people of Texas, they don't like it. They don't like, if you're shifting away from oil, for example, there's a lot of oil going on in Texas, and they're not going to be a fan of switching to these electric cars and everything else. They're going to push back. The people in the cities kind of align differently than that, but I think the heartland, I think a lot of these border counties and a lot of the families that are along the border, they're not going to have it. So we're going to see Texas go by about probably 9 points, could even hit 10, but I think 8 or 9 is a very reasonable prediction. Another state that'll be likely would be Florida. Ron DeSantis is doing a fantastic job there. I have very little bad things to say about Ron DeSantis in terms of his performance there, even if you compare to states like California, New York, New Jersey during COVID, states that were very, very strict on lockdowns, and how Florida, they kept the schools going, they kept the economy afloat, and they overall, it didn't reflect in any worse of a situation with COVID in terms of deaths and hospitalizations and everything else. Florida's doing very well, and Ron DeSantis proved that lockdowns don't work and everything else. And Ron DeSantis is doing a great job. He's easily going to win in 2022 in the midterm. And, and if he does end up being the nominee, we'll see probably similar results as we would if Trump was the nominee in 2024. But Ron DeSantis is doing a great job there. He's helping with the shift. We're seeing a lot of shifting in Miami-Dade County down here in the southeast. Miami-Dade, I think for this election, I think it's very feasible, and it might be a bold prediction, but I certainly think Miami-Dade could flip. It was a Democrat county for a long time. It was a blue county, and it's a very large Cuban population, and people that fled Cuba, they fled the communist regime there. They're not a fan of socialism, and the more the left embraces socialist policies, the more the Cubans are going to be running in the completely opposite direction. So I think we'll see a shift on Miami-Dade. I think we'll see it actually flip red. And even once I keep saying national environment, we saw Florida go to Trump by 1.2, and in 2020 he won it by 3.4. So in a national environment that shifted by 3 points to the left, Florida thus would have flipped about 5 points to the right. And I think that's going to continue. That trend's going to continue. I think Donald Trump will win Florida by about 6 points. And if Ron DeSantis is on the ticket, he'll win Florida by about 8 points, 8 or 9 points. But I think Donald Trump will win Florida by 5.5, 6 points, absolutely. Another state I'll say is likely is North Carolina. It's a state that that Donald Trump won by 3 in 2016. He won by about 1.5 in 2020, and I think he'll win it by around 6 points again. I think North Carolina has always been a battleground state, at least in recent memory, but it's always been one that's always leaned Republican. It went to Mitt Romney in 2012. Obama only won it by zero point 0.3 in 2008, and that was an environment that was a massive landslide. That he won that popular vote by 10, and he could barely flip North Carolina. So I think North Carolina is a state that'll remain reliably Republican for a little bit longer. That's for sure, and I think that it'll be reflected. I think Trump will win this thing by about 5-6 points. Additionally, I think looking on, I think North Carolina it can certainly trend to the left, but at least at the moment, with what's going on with a lot of people having buyer's remorse in Joe Biden, I can pull up again this approval rating. It's not good. He can hide as long as he wants, and he's still underwater, and it's hard to come back from that. It's really hard to come back from that. So yeah, there's a lot of things that they tried as well. I mean, first it was the Afghanistan pullout. They absolutely dropped it. They absolutely dropped the ball, and they thought that the war in Ukraine would shift people a little bit more, and it didn't work. They thought that Roe v. Wade would have people more aligned with the left, and so far it has not worked. So we're seeing a lot of negative. It's continuing to turn downward, and so I think we're just going to see a lot of that in the future. If we move on now to the lean states, which lean states are anything I would consider is between a 1 and 5% margin for either candidate. I think starting with the Democrat lean states, I think we can easily say Minnesota. Minnesota is a state that hasn't gone Republican since 1972 in the Richard Nixon landslide. Even in the Ronald Reagan landslide, where he won every state except Michigan and D.C. Not Michigan. I'm sorry, Minnesota. He won every state except for Minnesota and D.C. And Minnesota is just a hard egg to crack there. So Minnesota is a state that Trump actually got pretty close to winning. In 2016, it was about 1.5 points. But even with the BLM riots and the protests happening in summer of 2020, Biden still got it by 7 points. There was a lot of things on fire in Minneapolis, and even with that. Even with that in mind, it still went by a decent amount, and I think it will get closer. I think that Biden could win this by about 4 points or so, but 3-4 points. But I think it'll take a little bit more to flip Minnesota, and the whole Rust Belt, at large, it has been trending a lot more toward the right in recent times, especially with the more populist agenda that Donald Trump's been pushing and other America First candidates. But Minnesota, I think, just needs a little bit of an extra oomph. So Minnesota's definitely going to get closer, but that'll remain in Biden's column. Another state, and this is something that I'm kind of going out on a limb on, New Mexico, I think will be lean. I think it'll probably be about 4.5 to just under 5 points. It's very, very iffy on whether or not it's actually going to be a lean or a likely state. But I have it going lean because, number one, it is at the border here. They're experiencing it, and people are not happy with what's going on the border. They assigned Kamala Harris to be in charge of the border, and she hasn't visited there once. It took Donald Trump going down there to the border for her to even go down near it. And when she said that she'll visit the border, she was a couple miles off, quite a few miles off, to be honest. So she really hasn't been doing her due diligence there. So I think New Mexico will definitely get closer than Colorado, for example. New Mexico is a state that has always trended farther to the left than Colorado, but this actually was a different in 2020. So Colorado went by 13.5 and New Mexico by just under 11. So compare that here, 5 to 8. So the turn to the left in New Mexico is a lot smaller, and it's actually trending a little bit further to the right compared to states like Colorado and states like Virginia. So I think New Mexico will actually be a lean state. Now, like I said, I'm really going out on a limb there, and it could very well change. It could be a likely state, and I kind of flip-flop on that every day or so. It's very on the border there, which, pun intended, it is very on the border there. But I mean, like in terms of, it's right around that 5-point margin, at least in my head. Another state that I think would be lean would be Maine at large. We have a second district that's very red and a first district that's a lot more blue, and it's pulling in either direction. And I think when the dust settles and it averages out, I think that Biden could get it by around 3, 4 points as well, just similar to Minnesota. This is a state that Donald Trump got pretty close to winning as well in 2016. It was within 3 points there, and then it was a bit different. It was about 9 points. It was a lot more of a shift there in 2020, and I think that I think Trump could get it to about +4 for Joe Biden. But that's it for the lean states for the Democrats, and we'll shift on to the lean states for Republicans. And one thing I do want to make note of here is we haven't done any lean states, and what we're seeing is essentially the exact same states and districts that Donald Trump won in 2020. We've already matched it. We got North Carolina, we got Maine second, everything. We've already at the equivalent of 2020 election. We're at 235 to 221. And of course, it's not 232 like it was before because we did have a census. We have different votes here. We got a lot more gains in Texas and Florida, and votes being lost in California and New York, which will ultimately end up helping Republicans more. So we have that going on as well. But if I look at the lean states and mark my words on this, when election night comes, the first state that will flip in Donald Trump's favor will be Wisconsin, and I say that very confidently. I think Wisconsin will go to Donald Trump by about 3 or 4 points, and that's really saying something. But Wisconsin is a state that's been very, very close. It's been razor thin, and Donald Trump won it by about 0.6 or 0.7 in 2016, and Joe Biden had a very similar margin in 2020. I think he only won that by 0.7 as well. So we've seen very close elections in Wisconsin, and they have a governor's election coming up in November. Tony Evers, the Democrat that's currently in charge, is up for re-election, and that could go either way. I do think the Republicans will end up flipping that governor seat, but that's a different discussion. And like I said, we will make videos about the midterms that are coming up. But looking a little bit further ahead here, Wisconsin is going to be a Republican state for future elections. I think that it's had conservative views for a while. It's been a very close state for a long time. George Bush nearly won it in 2000. It was very close in 2004. Donald Trump got it in 2016. I think it's just going to remain up there. The Rust Belt no longer aligns with a lot of the left's policies anymore, and I'll say that as well with Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania will be a lean state, and I think it'll be a lot closer than Wisconsin. I think Biden won it by 1.2, and I think Trump will probably win it by 1.2, 1.5 as well. I can foresee Trump getting about the same margin that Biden won it with in 2020. Pennsylvania, Scranton Joe is no longer a moniker that he can use. Scranton Joe is dead. The people in Scranton, the people in Lackawanna County, they're not. They've been betrayed by Joe Biden. Joe Biden says that he's from Scranton, but he hasn't really, he hasn't lived there since he was 9 years old. And this is a blue collar state. This is a coal mining state, a state that, the Pittsburgh, for example, the Pittsburgh suburbs, they've continued to trend right. And the only thing that's really helping out the Democrats in Pennsylvania anymore is Philadelphia and the suburbs around Philadelphia, Montgomery County, for example. Those are where Trump can certainly pick up more voters, but Philadelphia is really what's keeping Pennsylvania close. The rest of the state does not align with the agenda of Joe Biden and the more far left candidates that are out there. They're really not on that page anymore. So Pennsylvania's another state that I think will go by lean margins. Arizona is going to be another flip. Carrie Lake is running there for governor, and I think she's going to do a fantastic job. She just won her primary, and I think she's going to end up winning the governorship. I think it'll be a similar situation with Ron DeSantis there, and especially if she does get in, if she does win, with the election reform laws, with fixing the border, people are gonna get a taste of that. They're gonna want more, and we're gonna see that, in the election here in 2024. I think Donald Trump will get Arizona by around 3 points or so, very similar to his margin in 2016, 2-3 points. So he won by 3.5 here, and I think he'll win by 2.5, 3. Even though Arizona did trend more left and Biden won by 0.3, but I'll go out and say it right now. Arizona, just like Georgia, which I'll get to next, they were flukes. I mean, I can open up Arizona right now. It was a 10,000 vote margin there, and I can open up Georgia as well, and that's an 11,000 vote margin. And what happened with Georgia? It was those suburbs around Atlanta. It was what was going on in Atlanta. Maricopa County did flip, for example, in Arizona. And Maricopa County, that's where Phoenix is. There's a lot going on in Maricopa County, and I think, very narrowly went for Joe Biden. And I think that Donald Trump could he might flip it, but I think he'll get incredibly close to winning it at the very least. And with that, I mean, that's all he really needs is to get very close to winning it, and he can easily flip the state. So Arizona's going to be a lean state. I think it'll carry up about 2.5, 3 points. And I think Georgia will also be a lean state. I think he'll get it by about 1 to 1.5 points. And so what do we see already? I mean, Donald Trump's already won. It's 291 to 221. Uh, so we're already up there. We already are seeing a Donald Trump second term, first time since Grover Cleveland that we have a president serving two non-consecutive terms. So we're making history here. We're making history tonight. And the next up, I mean, next thing I can do is go on to tilt states. And tilt states is anything that's within a point. This is something that is just very much, it can go either way. It can very much go either way. And I think New Hampshire is going to be a tilt state for the Democrats. New Hampshire, in a historical sense, has had a lot of disdain for incumbents. George Bush won it in 2000 and he lost it in 2004. Barack Obama won it by a considerable margin in 2008, but 2012 came and that margin slimmed down quite a bit. He did continue to carry it, but the margins definitely tightened up. Donald Trump in 2016 got very close to carrying it. It was a very close race. 0.37 votes, which in New Hampshire reflects to about 3,000. That's less than 3,000 vote difference there. So New Hampshire is a state that I think will end up coming back toward the Republicans. In 2020, Biden did win it by about 7.5 points, and I think it will get a lot closer again. New Hampshire is an interesting one there. It's got a lot of libertarians in there, a lot of people that are less for government intervention, government interference. Things like what happened in Ukraine and everything else. People there won't be as keen on it. So, especially with the incumbent thing, and that's the biggest factor to me is the lack of support for incumbents. So New Hampshire will be a state that I think that the Democrats will carry by about 0.8, 0.9. So not as close as 2016, but I certainly think it'll get a lot tighter in there. And so moving on from that, I think we'll just continue going west. And I think with Michigan, we're going to see Donald Trump flip Michigan back. Michigan is a state that Donald Trump won by a very slim margin. I think it was by about 0.28 or 0.22. 0.22, yeah. So it was a very close state. Donald Trump very narrowly got it. And then when 2020 came, Joe Biden got it by just under 3. Michigan, Gretchen Whitmer is the current governor of Michigan, and she's up for election in 2022. I don't know how that race is going to go out. I think that she'll still manage to hold on, but I think it'll be pretty close. But a lot of people in Michigan are fed up with what happened in terms of the lockdowns and the mandates. People there are very fed up, and the biggest thing going for Michigan for the left is Detroit and the suburbs around Detroit. But the rest of Michigan, especially, there's a lot of room for Trump to grow, and I think he could easily get Michigan back. I think he could get it by probably about 0.5 or 0.6. I think he could. I think he will improve upon his margins in 2016. And then, of course, the next, it's not exactly a state, but we're going to go to the 2nd District of Nebraska, and that's an interesting one. I mean, personally, I think it could tilt either way. I won't have a very solid prediction on the 2nd District until I see what happens in 2022. They did do some redistricting, and it's not that different from what it was in the previous map, but the 2nd District is a bit different. There's a lot of suburban population there, and they were a lot more for Biden in 2020. But I think he's losing a lot of suburban support with what's been going on anymore in the last couple of years. Like I said, there's a lot of buyer's remorse, and we've pulled up the approval ratings a couple times already. I do think that it'll be a narrow win for the Republicans there, but it's just hard. That's just kind of going with the rest of the national trends here is why I'm making that call there. After the midterms, I think I'll have a lot more of a solid prediction for it. And we have one state left, and that's Nevada. Nevada is no longer the state that it once was with the Harry Reid Democrats. They had a pretty big dynasty there, and the Democrats had a strong party in Nevada, and that just has not been the case anymore. A lot of the socialists have taken over in the Democratic Party in Nevada, and it does not align with the voters really. They've been rejecting these candidates that the Democratic Party has been putting out in Nevada. They've been rejecting a lot of them. And I think we're going to see it flip. And I'll also show you some trends that have gone on recently. So I think it will flip. And that's another thing is Trump lost it by 2.4 in 2016, and he lost it by the exact same margin in 2020. And like I said, this is where a national environment that shifted 3 points to the left compared to the previous election, and Trump still managed to hold on by the same exact margin. So we're seeing essentially Nevada go 2.5, 3 points to the right, even though it has the same margin. But in terms of on a national scale, it stayed the same while a lot of other states continue to move to the left. And I think that with the socialists taking over, and I mean, all you have to do is come at Nevada with what's going on in the border. It's very easy to flip it. I think Nevada and Arizona are very similar situations here. So I think Nevada will go to Donald Trump, and I think it will go to Donald Trump by probably about 0.6. I think the closest race really that we have going on is Michigan. I think that's the one that's probably the closest. But Nevada, 0.6 or so. I think that's it. So we got right here, we got 313 to 225, and this is my prediction at the moment. I think it can go either way. We're still 2 weeks out, 2 years, my bad. And, so it can go either direction. Donald Trump could expand upon this situation here, or Joe Biden could end up actually coming back and having a bit of a second wind. But, we'll see what happens. As it stands, this is my prediction, and if there's any sort of disagreements or anything you want to say, leave a comment, leave a like. If you want more content, I mean, subscribe as well. I have a lot more ideas planned. I want to talk about 2022 and the midterms. We can do election nights, and there's a lot of things we can do. We can discuss current events and everything else. But this is at least my prediction as it stands right now. August 7th, 2022. Donald Trump 313 to Joe Biden's 225. All right. This is pure political pandemonium. Out.